interpreters with us today, Carly and Laura. Thank you so much for being here and making this accessible for all. And we also have a great group of people. That is you who joined us for this lunchtime session. Thank you so much for sharing part of your day with us. We really, really appreciate you being here. Feel free to get your name and your pronouns and a little bit about yourself in the chat so we can get acquainted with everyone that is here. It's also going to be a great way to ask questions to the artists. That has been a fantastic part of these Kresge artist salons, is the ability to drop a question in the chat, and I will integrate that into the Q&A portion of our segments. And the way it's going to work today is that we'll talk to the artists, they'll introduce themselves, we'll see a video presentation that helps us really understand their work, and it'll give us a better idea of what they're all about, and then we'll have a little Q&A session after that. That's when your questions will be integrated into the conversation. Again, if you're having any issues with your Zoom connection or the video isn't coming through for you, Andrea will also drop a link in the chat where you can view the video on your own at the same time that it's playing via Zoom. If you have any questions that come to mind, again, during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. And yeah, now that we've got everything set up, the table is set, we're all here together. Thank you again for joining us. Brian Day will be the first artist that we speak with. Brian, thank you so much for being here.
Mr. Hooper, thank you so much. Nice to finally meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I've been looking at your work, it feels like forever, which has been such a privilege to see your stuff and to see it everywhere. Before we watch your video, go ahead and introduce yourself and the medium that you work in.
All right. Yeah, as mentioned, my name is Brian Day. I'm from Detroit. I'm a photographer, and this video will be about some of my practice in and around Detroit, focused on a project that I did called Detroit from Above. And so it's aerial drone images of Detroit from above.
All right, we're going to talk to Brian right after we watch this video. Let's check it out.
A designer whose work I followed for many years used to talk a lot about making the invisible visible. Perhaps what makes photographers unique from other visual artists is that we will climb, crouch, and crawl through mud to find a unique perspective, to make something visible that hasn't been seen before. Sometimes these aerial images are planned, and other times they're more of a spontaneous curiosity. I try to shoot on days when I can catch some dramatic sunlight that creates interesting contrast and shadows. In order to make larger prints of the drone photographs, I try not to crop them at all when I'm shooting, so that usually means a bit of back and forth on the controls, tweaking the composition again and again until it's exactly the way I want the finished image to look. Obviously, my digital cameras shoot in color, but I've been shooting long enough to have a pretty good idea how color images will translate into a final black and white photograph. Some photographers call this pre-visualizing, and it's really just a matter of imagining things like how the yellows or blues might look converted to black and white, especially if I use a filter to emphasize one tone over another. Once I get the images home, I import them into my computer using a program called Adobe Lightroom. Lightroom is really the only tool I use for my images. I don't shoot a large volume of photographs, so I'll usually scroll through the ones that I have really quickly and mark one or two that might look interesting. From there, my editing process is essentially converting the image from color to black and white, and then deciding whether I need to adjust the contrast, highlights, or shadows. Printing photographs might seem simple, but it really is an art in itself. My images are printed using a special technique called piezographhy. Instead of the basic black and white inks that a normal printer has, Pisography also replaces the color inks with up to 11 special shades of gray. The result is a print that has a wider tonal range and more detail than a normal printer might create. Since Pisography can be pretty complex, I often send my images off to a professional print expert. But over the last 2 years, I built my own Pisography setup as well so that I can make prints at home. It's really satisfying to see an idea become a digital image and then see that digital image become a physical print. I've almost started to feel like my images don't truly exist until they're printed. I look around Detroit and see people coming in from all over the country, from all over the world, really, curious to find out what Detroit is about, curious about the culture, the energy, the vibe, the people. They aren't just coming here to visit. People are putting down roots here. Folks who left are coming back. And those who never left, they knew all along what the rest of the world is finally rediscovering. That Detroit is much more than a flyover city. Detroit is home. Detroit is real. Detroit is beautiful. Through photography, I love having the chance to contribute to that narrative.
Really nice work there, Brian, taking us into your body of work. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll start with a simple question here. I'm really curious when you first got a camera into your hands and realized that this was a powerful tool for you to communicate.
Yeah, so my dad was a sort of a hobby photographer when I was growing up. So I was always familiar with, the nice camera in the house that I couldn't touch, and fascinated with, film negatives and how photographs could be developed and how they could come out. But as I got older, I didn't really take an interest in photography myself until about 2008. I had taken a new job and I was looking for some new hobbies. I was getting a little too old to play basketball anymore, at least so my knees taught me. So I had a colleague at work that said, hey, I go out and shoot on the weekends, and, I got this camera and I take pictures of Detroit. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Maybe I'll join you one day. And so that led me to going out and buying my first camera, and had no idea what I was doing, and just got out in the streets and started shooting and learning about photography really from the ground up.
I wouldn't have expected to hear that it's been a fairly recent development of yours, because I don't know, I feel like I've been looking at your work for a lot longer. And maybe that's speaking to the power of it. But in terms of your career, can you take me a little bit about when it started getting a little more serious, or more than just joining a friend for a hobby?
Yeah, so when I first started out, you get a camera and it's like you don't know what to do with it, right? You just go out in the streets and start taking pictures. And like so many other people that start taking photos here in Detroit, the most obvious thing that people take pictures of are the abandoned buildings and stuff like that on the street. And, honestly, that's what I started photographing. It was easy to do, and I could go out and do it. And I remember I was photographing a building one day, and a guy who lived across the street from the building, he asked me, why are you taking those pictures? Like, what are you doing with those pictures? And it was about 2009, maybe 2010. And I said, I don't know. I'd take the pictures and then post them online. I mean, no big deal. And the guy said, if you lived across the street from an abandoned building like this, would you put it out there like that? Would you take those pictures? And is that how you would present your home? And at the time, I didn't think much of it, but that stuck with me, and I couldn't let it go when he said that. And it made me think about how was I representing my home and myself and my work, and ultimately, the city. And so that was kind of a turning point for me. To focus more on sort of a documentary aspect of Detroit, with an unapologetically optimistic spin to my work, but trying to be more honest about the good and the bad, and not just focusing on the bad, because that was a little bit, it was exploitative, to be quite honest. And I was glad to get sort of a reality check and change directions early on.
Yeah, that period, 2008, 2009, you're really in the glory days, if you will, of ruin porn. Ruin porn was everywhere. You had a lot of national media outlets coming in and putting that all over their publications and continuing to build that stigma of Detroit. Some of it's truthful, right? There's plenty of abandoned buildings here. There's no denying that. But that idea of narrative and optimism definitely came across in your video, to a point where it actually felt personal. You're a third generation Detroiter, and you had those remarks in there. Detroit's a flyover city or in a flyover state. It seems like there's something you're really trying to prove to the rest of the world, or to show with your photography. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the reason I caught that video, Detroit is a flyover city, we were on an airplane once, and I could overhear a conversation like from the row in front of me, and these guys were talking about, traveling back and forth, and one of them mentioned Detroit, and the guy said, "Oh yeah, Detroit's a flyover city," and when he said that, I was kind of like, "What? What do you mean?" I wanted to shake his chair and be like, "I'm from Detroit," but I was sitting there thinking about it, and I couldn't let that phrase go, like, a flyover city. What does that mean? I had to think about it. And, I realized that for people who aren't from Detroit or from Michigan, a lot of people have such a negative opinion of the place of Detroit that they think it's not even a place worth stopping. Like, if you're in an airplane and you got to stop there for a layover, you get out as soon as you can. So they think of it as a city that you ignore. And so if you ignore the place, then that means you ignore the people. Right. And so for me, as a photographer, that was one of those things that made me think, as sort of my own hypothesis for shooting, there's two reasons to think about, taking on a project that tries to help people think differently. And number one is, if you're not from this place and you've got an opinion that's been shaped wrongly, then what can we do to change that perspective? Or is the perspective that you have honest? But then the other side of the coin, the other hypothesis for me is for, even if you're from this place, even if you're from Detroit and you've been here your whole life, sometimes you can get jaded and take it for granted and even kind of lose appreciation for what you have. And so that project, Detroit from Above, was literally and figuratively taking a different perspective to see if I can see Detroit differently, and to see if the work, helps other people see Detroit differently as well.
What has that perspective meant for you as a photographer? Like, when I look at it, so many of the images can become something else. The image of a highway becomes abstract art. That new perspective is really interesting. But I'd love to hear you talk about what you gained from going up into the sky.
Yeah, well, again, being born and raised in Detroit, I mean, you see these landmarks through your life, or you travel on highways, or you see certain buildings, and, you see them from your normal horizontal, however tall you are, 5-6 feet tall, sort of perspective. And that's what of the city. And so you get so used to it. And I had gotten so used to, so many things that even as a photographer shooting from the ground level, I just felt like I wasn't seeing enough, and I think most of us photographers are visually greedy, right? You want to see more, you want to figure out a different angle, a different way to look at things. And so the drone was a way for me. I'm a technologist by trade. So, of course, I was interested when consumer drones came out and you can control them with your phone and a device and see what the camera sees and that. So I initially took it on as sort of a technical curiosity. I want to see how this thing works. I want to push it to its limits, see what it can and can't do, what types of photographs can I make with it. And it was kind of an accident that I started to take those sort of vertical abstracted images. I was shooting just regular horizontal, skyline images. And one day I tilted the camera down and I was like, wow, I've never seen the Joe Louis fist look like a fist raised in victory instead of a fist thrown as a punch. And that was another turning point for me where it was like, wait a minute, maybe these images might be something totally different from what they are. And what does that look like pursuing it? So it was kind of a curiosity to go around the city and see how can I get a new look at something that I was already super familiar with, or I thought I was.
Andrea's got a great question in the chat. And again, I invite everyone that's here hanging out with us for the Artist Salon. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will make sure the artists get asked. Andrea says or asks, what makes you choose color over black and white or vice versa when you look at an image you're capturing?
Yeah, well, I think there's certainly a nostalgic element to it. When I was younger, I'm of the Generation X, where I grew up watching, some old Alfred Hitchcock movies, and I love movies by guys like Akira Kurosawa, the old school black and white movies. And I was always fascinated by the mystery that a black and white image creates, because it doesn't tell you the full story. You have to use your imagination a little bit when there's a black and white image, and the focus is on contrast and the quality of the light rather than a color that jumps out like red or yellow. And so, as I got older and I started to get into photography myself, it was a challenge for me to intentionally choose black and white over color and to make that sort of a consistent theme of my work, and really focus on, how I could abstract images and focus on that detail and highlight and shadow more so than individual colors that might attract the eye.
You started talking to us about, a neighbor coming out and asking you, how would you feel if the house across the street looked like that and represented where you lived? And now you've really flipped that into this whole career, this artistic career. I'm really curious how people have responded to these ideas and themes and your mission that you've got through your photography. What have people said to you about the project?
Yeah, I think the response is generally positive. When I had I had a solo gallery show of the Detroit from Above work, and it was really cool to see so many friends and family and people that I didn't know show up to the show and look at the images. And people that were lifelong Detroiters were walking around looking at the images like, that looks familiar. I don't know exactly what it is. Oh, that's the Hart Plaza fountain, or that's, I-75. And so it was really nice to watch in real time people who were like, oh yeah, I pass that every day and I never think about it. And wow, I didn't realize it was that beautiful. I didn't realize that so many architectural elements of Detroit were so beautiful and so well thought out. And it kind of speaks to the fact that, as I think about architecture, it really has an impact on our emotions and how we feel about life, how we feel about our surroundings. And so it's been really nice to see people look at that work and say, I never thought about Detroit in that way. And I see Detroit as this beautiful city architecturally, and not just a brown, old, dirty city as people may often sometimes think about an old city. So it's just been really nice to see people say that they never thought of Detroit in a certain way until they saw these images.
SK Young asking, can you speak to some of the permissions you need for your drone work?
Yeah, for sure. And hello, Kay. Kay is awesome. So I have an FAA pilot's license that I took and got certified for to be able to fly a drone commercially. With that comes the normal permissions with flying an aircraft in what they call restricted space. And so, airspace around Detroit, as it is over every city, everywhere in the United States, there's different classes of where you can fly, how high up you can fly, what to do if a helicopter comes, getting permission from the local airport or the, other authorities before you fly. And so I follow the normal FAA processes. There's an app that you can use to request permission to fly in a certain place. I also have, drone pilot's insurance just in case I crash into something, because I do some projects for some news outlets and things like that. So, I keep it pretty official. There's not really a lot of, rule breaking when it comes to how I fly. But that said, the rules have changed significantly from when I started taking drone images to now. Now there are a lot more what they call no-fly zones, where if you've got a small, commercial or small personal drone, you cannot fly it like over Tiger Stadium or something like that. So try to stick to the rules and follow the FAA guidelines when I go out and fly.
Brian, we could talk to you all day, but we got to keep it moving here, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and congratulations with your Kresge Fellowship. We'll talk to you a little bit later on about that fellowship and what that's meant for you. But Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Okay, our next guest for the Kresge Artist Salon is Jessica Frelinghuysen. Hello.
Hi.
How are you, Jessica?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm a big fan of your work. I'm excited to be with you here today. And we're going to watch your video in a second here, but go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your medium that you work in.
Yes. So I think I'm pretty multimedia based. I'm going to share most of my studio practice, which is in and out of the traditional studio. I do a lot of work in neighborhoods and talking to people and gathering sort of the core material that I use for bigger projects. So those can range from performance, wearables, installations, and videos.
All right, we're going to talk to Jessica right after we watch this video and learn a little bit more about her.
And 7, and 8, and 9, and 10, and 11. Oh, hi! I'm Jessica Frelinghuysen, and you caught me during my midday workout at the Jazzercise World Headquarters. I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to show you some of my work and studio today. We'll have to walk across town to the Russell Industrial Center, where I've had a studio since 2011, back when it was cool. Some of the work I'll be showing you is from the past, but still really relevant to everything that I'm doing today in my studio, installation, and performance practice. So let's go. Grab a hydration weight, and let's walk back in time. Shoo, that was a lot of work. Oh, I see you got here before me. Well, let's head across the road. I'm meeting my friend Michelle there to help show you my studio.
Jessica, what building is this in?
This is the Russell Industrial Center, and there's a lot of artist studios and furniture makers and people like that here, so it's a big place. But this is Cave Gallery, where my studio is. Let me push that back. This is my studio. But yeah, you can see over here, like, I have a lot of screen prints, and some of these started when I was an undergrad. I think that one did. And the peripheral vision helmet. So I have this background in kind of strictly fine art, printmaking, painting, and then at one point during that undergrad experience, I was like, why do prints have to stay on the wall? So it just didn't make sense to me. I wanted to like take them off and construct things out of them. I was also doing a lot of video and performative work. So I think this all synthesized into having art that actually does things, or perhaps isn't necessarily about something, but is something. So a lot of these actually, like the listening indicators, are prints conceptually, but then they also turn into something that is a little bit more, I don't know, industrial design, conceptual, that you're actually able to wear and still has kind of an absurd quality to it, but functions, you know, in some way too. I do love patterning that forms itself into something that's three-dimensional. So whether I'm making like sewing wearables or constructing more like this this video sculpture here that looks kind of like a megaphone. But I also always, and I don't know why, maybe it's inherent because of the printmaking practice, but I always do things in multiples. And I think like these elbow rooms over here, there's 5 of them, and they come together and form one conversation tent in a circle. But then there's 5 of them, so 5 people can have the experience at the same time.
Does drawing play a big role in your process?
Drawing, yes. I have always drawn. I always keep a sketchbook and or a series of sketches of potential projects. But I think, yeah, as a way to get from like here to here, like drawing gets it out and on the paper for somebody else to understand. I even tell my students, like, don't even tell me what your idea is until you have a drawing for it. So I think anybody that's doing anything visual, in any capacity, I think drawing is totally necessary to the process. Yes, so one of my kind of studio practice techniques, I guess, is going out into the community. And hopefully, like if I'm gathering sounds from Detroit and Hamtramck, kind of reconfiguring them back in the studio and presenting them in an installation or something. But I usually, in order for myself to have a job as an artist, I'll make a uniform that I'll wear in order to kind of give myself the leeway to ask somebody questions. I have a couple uniforms, like this is for another project, but it's a welcoming committee uniform. It actually came about when I was thinking of how artists kind of deal with people coming to their openings and things like that.
Oh, yes.
For instance, if I was wearing this, I'd have a name tag on there too. But say you're wearing it at, if perhaps you're a greeter at a museum for an opening, or if you yourself are the artist, as I have been wearing this, you can have your kind of schmoozing happen during opening, and then when you don't want it to happen, you can do the pop-up anti-schmooze hood, which is attached to this. So, and then it lets everybody know that you don't want to schmooze. And you can kind of have your own personal space. There's a little bit of seriousness in this in terms of its utility, but most of the wearables, and I don't know, maybe it's inherent in most of the work, there's a little bit of humor too, because I think people, I don't know, I think it gives people a way to enter the work or like be attracted to it, and then perhaps they see more of a solution to a problem, or get to more of a sort of serious topic through the humor. speaking of humor, I am continuing to do my series Jazzercise. Jazzercise focuses on my daily problem of exercising while being a plus-size human in a city full of international foodstuffs. The performances engage audience in a common daily struggle of being able to fit into one's body as well as one's surroundings. The project is multi-tiered, as much of my work tends to be. The main idea puts forth an all-encompassing program of diagrams, signs, uniforms, classes, and public interactions that center around participatory performance workouts in and out of the gallery. Here you can see one at Public Pool Gallery. I've also gone to Missouri and New York doing these performances, and I continually want to do more in the future. I'd like to create a socially engaged practice that allows me to feel more connected and hopefully resonates within the work too. So here are some videos that I've been doing over the last year, trying to expand some Jazzercise ideas into 5-minute workout videos. Move from side to side. Something I like to do at the end of my Jazzercise exercise program is some facial workouts. These are very important to keep the face looking pristine. If you can make a face, you can do this one. Open your mouth really wide. When you close it, pretend like you're pouting. This works the jaw muscle. Oh, mine started clicking. And that's it for now. Thank you for working out with the 5-minute Jazzercise program. See you later.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Jessica. I feel like I've done my full workout for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in?
It's that easy. I am in the virtual Jazzercise gymnasium. This was a show at Public Pool in 2019. And it's my dream to resurrect it, to have a permanent Jazzercise gymnasium in Hamtramck or Detroit, where people can do participatory art workouts with me. So
I was really happy to see that live performance side of your work, because so much of the, you talked about the comedy that's sort of inherent, the humor that's inherently in your work, and it does seem to translate so well to the stage. Are you thinking of other opportunities to do more sort of sit down traditional live performances with your work?
Yeah, this is the sort of the first performance that I've actually had a stage. I usually do more interventions where I go into like the grocery store and throw meat around with the butcher, or wear a costume or uniform that I've made out in public and engage people that aren't necessarily thinking of that traditional audience performer relationship. But doing the Jazzercise performances and taking from the kind of setup of Jazzercise or traditional exercise classes, I think it allowed me to expand the way that I was making and showing this work to an audience. So yeah, I do have plans to do it more in the future. Apply for more things, apply for more opportunities to have spaces and events like the exercise classes, and sort of go off of that a little bit more. Yeah.
One of the main things that I love about your work is that I'm trying to figure out, what's the difference between performance art and straight up comedy. Which I know there's kind of, they do exist kind of in the same realm, but I'm curious how you end up defining these things or trying to describe them.
Yeah, I think well, in performance art, there's like a tradition of endurance and like pushing the body to different limits. And for me, that sort of comes into the practice of exercise, because this whole thing came about with me actually, going to the studio, going to the gym, and sort of like recognizing the futility between those two things, like trying to lose weight and trying to make art that you don't know if it's going to be accepted or not. So I think combining those together is important for me. Um, and yeah, I think performatively, like I mentioned with the pushing your body to different extremes. I'm trying to push myself to be an exercise guru. So I think I always come about the sensibilities of my artwork through humor. I think that's just inherent in who I am. And I do think that the goal of it is to bring ideas of body positivity, of recognizing, that you can do something, but you don't have to do it all. And how we interact with our space around us. So all of the foods in the gallery that we work out with are foods from Hamtramck, 20-pound bags of rice and things like that. So it has a relationship to the community, maybe a little bit more than like traditional like stand-up comedy would have.
Right, right. And you've gone out into the community quite a bit, again in Hamtramck. Can you talk a little bit about the listening suit that you built and what that project was all about?
Yeah, I don't know if you all have been to Hamtramck, but when I first moved here over 10 years ago, I was really interested in the cross-culture sounds that I would hear. So I would hear like church bells, plus the call to prayer, interwoven on top of ice cream trucks and things like that. Also really interested in engaging with people with my work. So I gave myself the job of being a interviewer or a sound collector. And so when I give myself a job as an artist, I usually make a uniform, sort of harking to that 9 to 5, what we do as workers. And then going out and collecting oral histories as well as different sounds in the community was a way of inserting myself into this community that I wasn't really from, but I wanted to embed myself into. So yeah, I'm really interested in people's stories. I'm interested in engaging with the individual on a daily basis. And so that sound collecting became sort of like the raw material for a lot of projects, for different installations, but also videos and other performances as well. Yeah, so it was both oral history and sound as well from the community.
A lot of different mediums that you're working in. I want to get this question from Ruth, which I think kind of goes into what we're talking about. And Ruth asks, how does the boundary setting / controlling the systems for socialization go with the performance work when you're leading large groups? But I would also expand on that, not just with large groups, but also some of that one-on-one interviewing that you do as well.
So I'm sorry, what about the boundaries?
Yeah, I guess that, the question
okay.
is how you control those boundaries when you're socializing with people as part of this performance.
Gotcha. Yeah. So like if I'm doing something that I am more in uniform out in public, I don't have that much of a boundary. I sort of like whatever happens, traveling around, going to the next place. If I do have a boundary of like the gallery, I think it sort of is a little bit easier. It kind of sets the tone for people coming into the space, and maybe they start not playing in, but have a clearer idea of what's supposed to happen. So coming into a gallery that might look like a gym, they might know that they need to work out here, or they're invited to work out there. But I think I like to blur those boundaries a lot. So I do think that, art is in life and life is in art. And so all of these things that are influencing me, I think I can turn back and say, like, it's really interesting. Let's look at our world a different way. Let's see if we can communicate and get together and think about ideas in a way that maybe we haven't before. So I do like blurring those boundaries a little bit.
Is there a principle that you try to keep in terms of making sure that it's at no one's expense, right? So if you're having people that are entering the gallery, they may know what they're getting into, but the man on the street, the interviews on the street, is there sort of the idea of like no one loses in that situation, even though they are somewhat unwillingly becoming part of your performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is sweetly subversive. I don't think anything is at the expense of anybody else. None of these are what's the word? None of these are like hoaxes or anything like that. It's all like I'm putting myself in the place. You can look at me doing this thing, or if I have somebody else wearing like the helmets or horizon lines, they'll be wearing those, and then people will come up and ask about like what is a horizon line? Why do you have these on? And then we say like, well, we live in a city and we're faced with verticals every day. What do you think? Do you have that same problem? And so it becomes a conversation rather than something that is meant to be adverse in any way. So, or that's my hope.
Right, of course. Yeah. And with your background, I mean, you're able to actually build these outfits, these uniforms, these contraptions, these inventions, I guess, in your studio. So it's really kind of vertically integrated. You're thinking it, you're creating it, you're performing it, you're making it.
Yeah, I think I have this sort of cross-disciplinary art plus design plus, conceptual. How do things exist in our world? I want to make them so we know how we can use them in different ways, and by that use, it makes us think of things in different ways, and maybe produces some way that's better, like some interaction that's better than we thought of. So. Very yeah, cool. I've always wanted to be like a Renaissance woman. So that's why if things look a little schizophrenic, it's because I'm trying to be a Renaissance woman.
Jessica, I'm going to frantically and quickly plug in my laptop before it dies. So while I do that, please tell us about some of your future projects that you're considering working on.
Well, like I mentioned, I'd like to have a permanent location for the Jazzercise Gymnasium. I'm currently, like you saw in those last videos, making smaller videos for the power of social media, and hopefully putting the 5-minute Jazzercise series up pretty soon, and thinking about like shorter interactions that can occur. I'm also working on a new set of paper helmets that sort of deal with more of the issues that we've been thinking about over the past 2 years, and how to interact socially in this capacity. And as we're getting out more in public, how do those like anxieties reveal themselves, and what can I make that will kind of quell some of those anxieties about socialization that we now have from being isolated for so long.
I know a lot of people here were a fan of the anti-schmoozing outfit. I really want that quite badly.
I'll take orders.
Question from Jen. This is maybe more of a suggestion. Says, flash mob Jazzercise in large public plaza? Question mark.
Yes, good idea. Let's do it.
Do you, going back to the opening thread here of, comedy performance art, have you considered, are you open to the idea of performing it more in a traditional comedy setting?
Yeah, I have thought about that, but it hasn't manifested yet. But yeah, I would be open to that. I think it'd be quite interesting again to blur lines, blur boundaries of disciplines. So yeah.
You've got me thinking. Maybe we'll manifest that together. Jessica,
Okay, sounds good.
thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us and sharing your story. Stick around because we'll talk a little bit about, I believe you're a Gilda awardee. We'll talk about what that has meant for you in a few minutes. So thank you again, Jessica. Right now, our third and final artist is going to help us land this plane. Please welcome Cyrus Karimipour to the Salon. Hello, how are you? Unmute yourself for me.
Okay, hi. Back,
Hi.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your medium.
Sure. My name is Cyrus Karimipour. I work mainly with photography. Well, primarily with photography. The video you're gonna watch is actually I intended on making it a studio tour because my studio's in my home, so I don't really have it open to the public. So I thought, oh, that'd be a good way to go about this. But my studio looks more like a junk drawer than like Jess's studio is immaculate, man. If my studio looked like that, it would have been a studio tour. So I ended up just kind of going through some of the processes and techniques I've worked with in the future, not in the future, in the past and presently, and added some images that result from such processes. And some things have been seen, some have not been seen, some have never left my studio. So yeah, so it's just kind of like more like a workshop without words, I suppose.
Yeah, and a bit of a Kresge Artist Salon exclusive. So let's
there you go.
And check out Cyrus's video, and then we will talk to him right after this.
Actually, the music is my friend Bob Ebeling. I'm gonna add links to his SoundCloud and Bandcamp in the chat. So if anyone wants to check out more of his music, you can be able to.
Yeah, please do. Let's go ahead and check it out.
Are we hung up?
I'm really glad you put the music link in there because the music was fantastic. Felt like I was living in that video. So
I
well
kind of
done.
wish I just made it a series of stills because it was so choppy. It kind of missed out on some of the movement that was in some of the images, but whatever.
There is a link for people to watch that video that Cyrus put together in the chat. If you watch it outside of the Zoom, it should be more clear. I highly recommend people check that out so they have a better idea of what they're seeing, not so laggy or choppy. But Cyrus, let's start with the last sort of image that we did see in your video. What's the process that we're looking at there?
I've actually been lately trying to print on the materials that don't that the ink doesn't adhere to. Like I started off like in photography, like my mid-20s, back when it was all like analog photography or traditional photography or whatever. And the magic of the chemistry and like the ritual was so interesting to me that I kind of like in grad school I started working with digital photography because that's pretty much, you know, it's pretty much what well, it wasn't the only facilities, but it was pretty much, I didn't want to be in the dark anymore, man. I didn't, sitting in the dark for years and years and years is not fun. So I kind of have been trying to adapt that same kind of like fluidity to the digital realm. And so I'll try to print onto materials that don't, that the ink doesn't stick to in order to transfer it somewhere else or to photograph it in transition or, you know, so basically the images at the end of the video, you saw the image just kind of like flowing and whatnot. You can't really tell with the choppiness of it, but it's basically I work on a copy stand, so anytime I do something, I can actually take a still while it's in motion, basically to try and capture certain aspects. But a lot of what I do in the studio is trying to dry ink immediately, which is I've tried liquid nitrogen, I've tried fire, I've tried, heat, all sorts of things, and it's really not working. so I use the photography to capture it, basically, because that does work.
So when we talk about you and photography, to say you're a photographer, I feel like really doesn't give it justice, because there seems to be so many different techniques that you're exploring, and you're manipulating a lot of images and maybe taking a photo of that final product. Can you talk a little bit more about your process and everything that goes into it?
I think, over the years, I've realized that maybe all these different trying to basically, like, I don't see myself as an artist as much as more of an explorer, like a kid poking an animal, like a dead animal with a stick or something like that. I'm more curious and trying to figure out what's going on around me, in a sense. But what was your question again? I'm sorry.
Well, it just seems like there's so many different things that you're doing under the lens of photography, and
I kind of see it more of as performance, but it's like a personal, private performance, essentially, and the images themselves end up being like a liner notes or a playbill or something like that kind of like a document of the experience for me, actually. And I like to try to get out of my head when I'm in my studio and try and it's like playing a musical instrument. Like if you play a musical instrument for a long time, your hands just do what they do, you kind of don't think about what you're doing, you kind of just let it flow. And that's what I try to do with my studio practice as well, is to try to just, separate myself from my mind, essentially, to try and find something new, find something different, I guess.
Yeah, you brought up that idea of being an explorer. Watching it, I mean, the intention is clear. It doesn't feel like you're just randomly experimenting with things, but is that what's happening most of the time?
A lot of the time, I try not to do anything that will be dangerous. Like, I'll do a little research sometimes. Like, I'm not going to mix ammonia and bleach in my studio or something like that to try and make an image. But generally, it's just when I was in grad school, the head of the school said, "Make all that you think of," and I always thought that was the most wizard of obvious kind of like ridiculous thing to say, but I've realized that that's totally true. I mean, make all that you think of is some of the best advice for studio practice that I've ever heard, actually, tell you the truth. And so I try to follow that advice a little bit here and there, and just try to see what happens,
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice for sure. And I always
make all I think of, but also make things that I don't think of, like by trying to separate myself from it. But I also I like to make images that are kind of ambiguous, because I like the viewer to actually have to put some of themselves into it in order to have their own kind of personal experience, the way that I have my own personal experience with it. I mean, it's generally you can think about it as like my own private psychoanalysis, myself or whatever. So I kind of like to hope that the viewer has the same sort of experience with the images.
Yeah, that's something I really love and admire about your work, is that there's so much to take away from it. I mean, just even the beginning thought of thinking, what medium did he even use to create this? Because when you look at the work, you're not sure if you're seeing a painting, you're not sure if you're seeing a photograph, and you end up having so many different mediums inside of one thing. But let's talk about the actual final product, some of the images that were part of your application for Kresge. What was some of the stuff that you really wanted to highlight, and what are we seeing when we're looking at them?
Are you talking about the While I Was Away series that I applied with? Yeah, that series came about because my wife and I got a piece of land up in northern Michigan for to spend time with the kids and whatnot. And I guess this land hadn't been used in many years, and so a lot of people just kind of claimed it, essentially, and we didn't really know that at the time. So I'd set up like trail cameras just to see the wildlife, see what was going on, and more often than not, I captured people just wandering around, and I was like, with these people. So I kind of was a bit frustrated at first, and I kind of felt like I started destroying the images of the people, just as like a kind of like a passive, I call it a passive aggressive expression of sovereignty. And so I through destroying those images, I kind of found techniques on how to actually kind of like blend the people with the background in a way that that kind of became something new, I guess. Like I don't know, peeling apart I was contact printing them to really sticky films, and what I found is that they're almost like microorganisms or some kind of like hint at the infinite in the surface of the prints. And so I was really kind of excited about that. And so when I started checking the cameras, I go up there every once in a while and check the cameras. Initially I was like, annoyed at seeing these people and kind of frustrated, but then it became a thing where I was looking for these people. I was like, oh, I didn't get anyone this week, And so it became a kind of an obsession. And it became kind of like what I consider an involuntary exchange. I didn't sign up for it, but I'm going to use them for something, I'm going to use them for to make something new for myself, I suppose.
And these people obviously have no idea that this is happening at all.
Oh, plenty of people look into the camera. Like the picture of the woman at the end of the video. I don't know if you watch the video, you'll see, but it's basically like, acid trip, face melting, kind of like a thing. She actually was looking in the camera like, but people do that all the time where they, they'll point out the cameras and whatever. There's actually the woman that, I don't know if you saw the choppy video of this is my little printing setup over here, but the woman that was on the print there, I actually saw her last year on the camera looking at the cameras, and then this year she came back, same woman but without pants on. I'm like, all right, the cameras are here. I don't know what you're doing. Plus a lot of women urinate on the property, which is kind of strange.
But they don't have any idea that they may be looking into the cameras. They don't know that you're going and turning them into original works of art.
No, not yet, but maybe someone will find out eventually. But I don't care. I mean, then stay out of my land if you don't want to be a part of the picture,
So you talked a little about people have to put themselves into your work, right? There's a lot to interpret. They often feeling very abstract, and there's a lot of different ways you can think about them. What are the common things that you hear from people that they are taking away from your work?
Well, I mean, people see different things. It's like someone looking at the clouds. Somebody might see a polar bear and somebody might see a mermaid or something like that. I mean, everybody kind of like with the very abstract images, people, I don't know exactly what subjects they're thinking. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but everybody has like a different reaction, and I don't know. I don't know exactly what people are seeing necessarily. I don't remember, to tell you the truth. But yeah. Sorry.
There is a question that we've got in the chat here, and this is coming from Ebony. And they are asking, what curiosity led you to your invented memory?
I was interested in consciousness, basically. That was like more like that was more of almost a research project kind of a thing. But that was actually, when I was making those images, that's kind of making the negatives of those. I was kind of dealing with very small bits of film, which kind of put me in like a kind of trance-like state. So kind of like a self-association kind of thing. And it got me thinking about how memory works and how it doesn't work, actually. I think a lot of people think memories are just like, oh yeah, here's I when I was 5 years old, I did this and that and the next thing, and here's my memory, like that. But apparently memories don't work that way. As you age, your memories change. Everything changes. You come at things from a different perspective as you age, and as you experience other things, your memories become contaminated with other information. So I was kind of interested at how the memories were basically liquid. They're not static. And everybody, I always thought that memories were kind of like a document in your brain, but it turns out that that's not true. And so I kind of was fascinated with that. And so that was perhaps my most that's the series that I probably had the most fun making, to tell you the truth. The most rewarding, I suppose. It was more like, that was the most like therapy out of anything else,
And there's a link in the chat that we just added there. So if people want to see these images from the Invented Memory series that Cyrus did, you can see that link in the chat. I highly recommend viewing that. We'll get one more question here from, and then we're going to bring all three artists back to the stage. Kay says, your work is amazing. It brings to mind manipulating Polaroids. I thought of that too, Kay. Were you influenced by any specific photographers / artists for the deconstruction of the images?
Okay, it's funny you brought up Polaroids because I was totally into Polaroids back in the day. That's kind of like, that was my first go-to for manipulation. And in terms of artists that influenced me, I kind of, in the beginning of my work, I basically was finding people through things I was trying, which is kind of funny. Like I made a lot of photograms a long time ago, and I remember finding artists that were doing photograms, like Adam Foose and whatever, people like that. And I was making photograms of, I was taking magazines and kind of printing, tearing out a page of magazine and printing it, and both images would come together on the final print. And so you'd have different kind of interplay between the images. And I was go, oh yeah, I'm doing this awesome thing. And then I was like, oh, Robert Heineken. Okay, he did that with his Rectoverso series. And so I basically would find people through that. I actually didn't come to art until much later, like maybe my mid-20s. I was a musician and studying English literature, basically. So for me, everything was kind of new. And so I was finding people through trying things, basically. So.
Cyrus, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your studio with us. And you're going to stay with us as we bring Jessica and Brian back in the fold too, to talk a little bit more directly about the Kresge Fellowship and also the Gilda Award that you won, Cyrus, for 2021 Gilda Award recipient named after Gilda Snowden, often acknowledging emerging artists or artists that, you know, are doing interesting things. And Cyrus, I'm curious for you what that meant for you, both, you know, in terms of an accolade as an artist, but also from a financial perspective too.
Actually, just before the Gilda Award, I was actually almost forced to, but I have had the same printer since 2006. Right after grad school, I bought a large format printer so I could do my own printing. And recently, it's been very difficult to find ink for my printer. So I ended up getting a new printer so that I could actually modify my old printer to make a large scale contact prints. Actually, I showed you the it's kind of strange, but it's kind of scary actually, but I put it on a weird angle to try to print flat onto the table. And so I wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, the Gilda Award, actually, I bought a new printer with it, which was fantastic. So I could actually potentially destroy this printer. Who knows? It's doing all right so far, but who knows, you know? So, I mean, it's actually made it so that I've been thinking about doing large scale contact prints like this for a long time, but I wasn't able to do it with the current setup. So actually this is opening up a new door for me to make a whole new section of work that I have been wanting to make. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Kresge Arts in Detroit and Center for Creative Studies and everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always interesting. It can mean so many different things to so many different artists on a lot of different levels. Jessica, I'm curious, also a Gilda awardee. What has that meant for you as an accolade, but also as a financial investment in your work?
Yeah, I think for me, I think, all of us have been making work for a long time. So to get that recognition from the city that I have decided to live in and make my home has been more than a financial boost, like a boost of confidence. And I've gotten a little bit more recognition from people around town and nationally for my work as well. So I think all of that is really good. And there's like a snowball effect that happens in terms of, being asked to do shows other places or just getting exposure for your work. So that's been really great. I could buy somewhere like camera equipment and green screen and things like that to do some of the other video work that I want to do now and in the future too, which has also been good. But to me, it meant more just getting that recognition, like you're doing what you should be doing and keep doing it, and having that sort of confirmation has really been good for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and congratulations again. Brian, you are a 2021 Visual Arts Fellow for the Kresge Arts in Detroit Fellowship. Huge accolade, one of the most prestigious in the country. What has that meant for you as an accolade as an artist, but also from a financial perspective?
Oh, as an accolade, I mean, it's such a huge honor. It's I think for any artist, you certainly want to be seen, right? You want to be acknowledged that the work you're doing is not in vain. Sort of as Jessica mentioned, to have the work sort of acknowledged and your presence acknowledged, it's just huge. I mean, it's not the reason why artists create work, right? I would create it if I was in a vacuum and no one ever paid any attention to it. But it certainly does, give you a little extra confidence. It makes me feel proud, makes me feel like I'm a part of a community. And to have such a great appreciation for my hometown and try to do work that honors that, and then have sort of an acknowledgement that, hey, we like this is good, this is good for the city, or it's appreciated. That's just a huge honor. I mean, it's hard to really put words into that. From a financial perspective, I'm sure Cyrus would agree. Printing is expensive. Buying ink and buying paper and just all the stuff that it takes to make a print, and there's so many things that can go wrong with it that it just makes it a super expensive gig. Trying to print these days, and so it's been useful for that to be able to manage some of that as I branch out more into learning how to print my own work and at the level of quality that I'd like to see it printed at. I also was able to publish a book over the last year, and that was a huge process, and requires quite an investment as well. And so it's been super useful to be able to do that. But more important than the money, like I said, it's just the sense that the acknowledgement that the work is going pretty well. So I appreciate that.
Well, Brian, Jessica, and Cyrus, congratulations to all of you, and thank you so much for joining me during this Kresge Artist Salon.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks to everyone that joined us for this conversation as well. Our last of the spring series, the Artist Salon. They've been really incredible, great conversations, a great way to get to know our artist community really intimately, one-on-one during these sessions. The cool thing is that this video and all the videos that were part of the Salon series are available to watch at Kresge Arts in Detroit Presents.art. That's Kresge Arts in Detroit Presents.art. We're going to get that link in the chat. All of the conversations have been really incredible, really informative, a ton of fun to dive into the studio practice of these artists too. So thank you so much to everyone that has participated, in addition to Brian, Jessica, and Cyrus. Thanks to everyone that joined us. I'm Ryan Patrick Hooper. Thanks for having me, Kresge Arts in Detroit. Thanks to WDET for working together on these incredible things. And we'll see you next time. I'm sure we'll definitely be doing it again. So thank you to everybody. I hope everyone has a very good weekend. Thanks for coming. Bye.